it's 2 minutes in, so I'll make a start. So I have to say to everyone, welcome to ARC Northwest Coast Seldom Heard Forum. This is our 6th session, and we will be focusing on prisoners and well-being. And just to give an introduction to who we are, if the slide can move. Yes, so this is us as a team. We are the public involvement and engagement team in the ARC. We've got Ruth Ball, our Administrator for Public Advisors, Selena Wallace, Public Involvement Manager, myself, Public Advisor Research Lead, and Nahid, our Public Advisor Lead for the Seldom Heard Forum. And also today we'll be joined by Steph, who's our Public Advisor co-lead for one of our themes, but she'll be joining us today and talking about some of her work on the grounds and experiences. This is our agenda. We have a lovely filled agenda with lots of speakers. We will have a short break in between just to give ourselves a stretch and also just go grab some coffee if we want to, or tea. And then finally, after following each speaker, we might take a question or two, but we would like to keep it also to the end to have a panel discussion. So if you'd like to share your questions later on as well. So some housekeeping rules, again, reminding everyone to please, if you can remain on mute while the presentations are on. This meeting will be recorded and the speakers will be pinned on the screen. However, if you still feel uncomfortable about being visible, you can turn off your video. Also, please do use this chat function to add any comments or show some questions. Myself, Selena, and Ruth and Nahid will keep an eye on the chat to pick up any questions. Again, there has been some few cases of Zoom meetings that have been hijacked. We don't anticipate this to happen, but if this was to happen, we will shut down the meeting immediately, and we apologize in advance. Anyone who's on Twitter, please use the Twitter handle. We've got the ARC Northwest Coast, so if you can share that, that'd be great. So a little bit background of who we are. So Applied Research Collaboration, ARC Northwest Coast. The idea is for us to bring together health and social care providers, NHS commissioners, local authorities, universities and public advisors, and the Innovation Agency, and more. And the idea is to support development and delivery and the implementation of research into practice to enable real positive change of patients and public, with the main focus, which is the overall focus, is reducing health inequalities. But our vision for the public is to improve health equity and applied health research through the voice of the population. Our Seldom Heard group or forum was created, and the idea for it was created. The creation came about to basically create an environment where ideas and views that are a reflection of issues and needs experiences by Seldom Heard groups can be exchanged, bringing together representatives of Seldom Heard groups from across the Northwest Coast, the opportunity to share experiences of the group and discuss how best we can enhance inclusion in applied health research. We have also created a workspace on the NHS Futures web pages. And the idea for that is that we can continue our communication with our attendees that attend the forum. So our recordings of the sessions are on there, and also there are some more like forum discussions where you can actually continue the discussions that we've had today with our speakers and also other attendees as well. We also want to enhance a link with networking across, so this is also an opportunity. We will send you this link following this session to enable you to be able to join this working space. So our topic is about prisoners and well-being. So to just give an overview before our speakers are to speak, is more than 70% of prisoners have some kind of mental health problem. Prisoners often experience disadvantages before being in prison, such as mental health disorder, distress, substance use, poverty and debt, homelessness, learning disabilities, domestic violence and abuse, speech and language problems. If we were to focus on a specific group, let's say, for example, like women who come into contact with the criminal justice system might often have experiences of issues such as trauma, domestic abuse, trafficking, and sex working. Nearly half of the women in prison have suffered domestic abuse, and over half have experienced childhood abuse as well. So if you look at this image as well, it just gives you an example of what, especially specifically if you're looking at gender, women who are have experienced the criminal justice system, and also if you look at this instance suicide, they're 40 times more likely to commit suicide than the general population. So this is just to give you a brief overview of what we will be talking about today, and what the population that we'll be talking about today, and hopefully we'll hear more and get more insight from our speakers. So without further ado, what I'll do is I'll stop sharing and I will pass on to our first speaker. And how do I stop sharing? And our first speaker is Jane Moodie from Active Lancashire.
Hi all, how are you? Thanks very much, Gemma, for that. I have got a PowerPoint, however, some of the slides I will flick through because having 10 minutes on a subject that I could spend all day talking to you on, and because I find it very rewarding as well, and we have a huge impact out there in the community. So I will cut it down a little bit for you, but if you do have any further questions, or obviously if you want to find any further information, then please don't hesitate to contact me, because the one thing I do love doing is talking about the programme that I have the pleasure of leading on. So yes, I am Jane Moodie. I'm the operations manager at Active Lancashire, and I also lead on the Challenge Through Sports Initiative programme, which is the shortened version is the CSI programme, and under that heading as well as the United Together programme, which is which is the one that we've had the evaluation through the fabulous ARC team. So without that, let me just share, and let's get this up. And this is a bit of hate, isn't it? This is your technical side that always has that come up?
Yeah, I can see that, Jane. Yeah.
No. Okay. So the CSI, the actual CSI program, it is a bespoke behaviour change program, which was it started 8 years ago, and it was brought about when people who were recovering from substance misuse, people coming out of prison, people with mental health issues, and people very much obviously in that criminal justice system, as in going through probation, etc. It was discovered that there was no activity being offered to this particular group. So we had probation services, public health, and another recovery service, who we had a huge conversation with Active Lancashire. And Active Lancashire, one of their things is obviously very much looking at the gaps and what we can do to fill those gaps. So we were very fortunate to be funded. We had a pilot project that ran for 12 months based on delivering free activity, which we offer free and fun and inclusive activity to that group of people. So that started 8 years ago, and on our little journey, we've branched out, we've adapted, we've learned, we failed, and we've learned from those failings as well. And we're not embarrassed to say that we've learned from those failings, because that has been probably the success of our programme 8 years down the line. We're extremely fortunate to have found some wonderful people that support our project on the way, and partners and organisations too, who have a huge input into our programme. So throughout those 8 years, the programme has very much been about building up people's resilience. It is very much about the physical health and the mental health, but I have a wonderful team of support mentors, classed as the CSI support mentors. We currently have 13 who operate across Lancashire, and although we're a small team, we are very effective as well with what we do. And the whole team have been through the programme, which is what makes it quite unique. So they've all what you would say is have to have a history. So it's very rare that when you look at people's DBSs and when it comes back clean, when we're sort of turning around and saying, no, I'm sorry, that's not good enough for us. We want you to have something on the DBS. So it's all about people who have got lived experience, and hopefully you all, well, just for those who don't fully understand the lived experience aspect of it, it means that they've either been through it could be the criminal justice for our programme, been through the criminal justice system, so they have spent time in prison, or they've been through the probation system, through community service, they've got mental health issues, they're in recovery from substance misuse, etc. So they've all started as participants, became volunteers, and eventually have ended up as the fabulous team members that we've got. So over the 8 years, we've actually had 36 team members that have come through the programme. And some of those who are on short hours, so it's 10 hours or 15 hours because of the benefits. If you work over the 15 hours, obviously it has an impact on the benefits. So we're seen as a stepping stone for some of those support mentors. And then the rest of the team who have been with us quite some time are full-time now, and are now project leads in their own rights and mentoring other people. So that's the CSI programme in a nutshell. This is a short film. It's about, I'm just wondering whether I share this or if that's all right, if I send the link over and if you share that, because it's about 3 minutes long.
Yeah,
so,
that's fine. If you can send it to me, Jane, I can send it to everyone. Yeah.
Wonderful.
I can also put it on the chat now as well.
Right, I'll send that over. So this is the CSI model. I've just realised, I've changed all the power slides, and that one's still the old logo in the middle. We rebranded not just before Christmas. So this is the participant in the middle. So this is what we're offering. We're offering the peer support and the social activity. The actual activity and the sport is what is the hook. That is the most important thing of all. And if there's one thing to sort of get across, and what we've all found, and I know there's a couple of people on here I work with and will 100% agree with me, is any activity running alongside any other service that individual is attending is what makes them get through and continue to work in the treatment service, go to a group session, attend NA, whatever it is that they're doing. As long as they actually attend an activity, the percentage or the percentage rate of that person completing, like I say, whatever it is that that other support that they're accessing is very high. So if they drop off the activity, then you will find that they will drop away from the, like I say, from any other service that they're doing. So it is so important that people do attend the activities. And this is very much talking about people who are within prison as well as those who are just coming out of prison. So one of the things that we have done just before lockdown, we ran a development program for a full week, and it was only with 12 people. But one of the things that came out, which was the strongest part of the development week that we did, was the activity that we'd done. And that was simply providing them with a level 1 and a multi-skills qualification. However, that was something that brought 12 individuals together as a team. And from that day onwards, throughout that full week, they were a team. And they are still, when we came out, obviously it meant it was easy for them to engage into the activities, because some of those have never done any type of activities, but we just made it by doing something so simple within the prison. We made it far easier for them to then link in with activities external, once they've come out of that prison service. So this is just, like I say, it's a simple model. So it's all about what we do. We have the activity and the mentoring throughout the whole of their journey. So this is the first layer of their journey. Then they carry on with activity. We move them on into when they're ready. It's about linking them in with education. It's obviously behaviour change. It's about skilling them. It's very much about getting them into volunteering, because that's so important part of it for building up the skills and the confidence and the resilience. And once that whole package has been put in place, which we also offer to the friends and the families, because that's so important too, to keep them as part of that support wraparound. What we do find is, obviously, it reduces the reoffending, and It's also about them integrating into the community, which again, it's, you know, building up that social peer, having some friends around them that are all like-minded. And then obviously the rest of it is offering that maintenance pathway, which the CSI programme and the United Together programme do offer. So if they've finished with the group support, with the treatment service, then what they do is they will carry on attending our activities and working with the peer mentors, because we find that if that isn't in place, then again, then it's another chance that they're going to slip, you know, they're going to slip off and they'll relapse, and then they get back onto that merry-go-round where they're back inside prison and they have to start all over again. So that's just a brief one on the United Together project, which we were very lucky to have the evaluation done by ARC, which there was a lot of learning for us as a programme as to how we've been working with the Football Trust and with some of our partners. So the evaluation was very much about how we could work better going forward, which we do start again with more funding on the 1st of August, which we're very excited about. So the United Together project is the CSI model. However, what we have done and what we do is we work with the 7 community trusts across Lancashire, and it's about us working with probation. So we have what we class as a 3-way. So you have our CSI mentor, the probation, the new name of them, probation practitioners, and the actual prison leaver themselves. So they sit down, have a chat, they look at the goals, they look at their individual needs, and then our CSR mentor would work with them to provide their individual needs. And it's also about linking them then into the activities. So the Football Trust, when they're ready, can I just apologise if you start hearing it? I've got a dog in the background. I've tried to shut her out, so if she barks, it's I'll go on mute. And so what happens then is our mentors link them in with the Football Trust, and the Football Trust provide some activity, and then they then try and link them when they're ready. They link the prison leavers into the programmes that they are also offering, which can be anything. It can be a timetable of wellbeing, it could be to do with building up confidence, it could simply be traineeships, it can be mental health sessions, so they have football, etc. So it really does vary, but it's worked, and this programme's been running for just over 2 years now. We were actually put into the Northwest Reoffending Plan and mentioned as being one of the programmes that should continue, which was a wonderful thing for us as well. So the resilience pathway, why we have a wonderful resilience pathway, we keep to a very, very simple model for CSI United Together. We have a trauma-informed approach. We're about to become a trauma-informed organisation, our Active Lancashire. The team have got the lived experience, which that's just invaluable, is having the lived experience. It's all about understanding and valuing the team, their history, and obviously very much about the participants. We have lots and lots of team WhatsApp groups for each of the activities that are running, because it's really important that we can keep in contact with them. We do a lot of development, we do a lot of supporting, mentoring and training, and that very much includes the participants that are coming through as well. That's not just about the team, and because that's what we found really important. And we offer group sessions, so with counsellors, and one-to-one sessions as well, because we also find that people, including our team, so when they come through with us, they're very, very strong at that particular moment, but as they become stronger within the day-to-day work and family life, what they do then is they open some doors to their to when the early days when things have happened to them, and that's when we start to see them spiral down, you know, and that relapse is then starting to loom. So what we have to do then is put in those sessions and those counselling sessions and one-to-one sessions to look at the trauma and to help support them and build up the resilience to come through that. So some of the changes that we've managed to bring through, so system changes, we've had activities embedded into tenders because of the success that we've done. That's including from with probation and public health and retreatment services, because they find that the prison leavers, when they're coming through, and those who are on licence as well, have found that this is really important for to keep them on that journey and keep clean. We're a recognised programme, one of the only recognised programmes by the World Health Organisation. As I've mentioned before, we're in the Northwest Reoffending Plan. We've mentored other active, we still mentor other active partnerships who are delivering projects which are similar to this now, and it's been recognised, which is wonderful, across the UK. We're seen as a Sport England flagship still, and we're still used to this day to go out there and discuss what we're doing. So the achievements, we've over 7,000 participants in 8 years that have engaged in our programme, and I'd say 60% of those are on licence or part of the criminal justice system, which is a huge amount. We've had over 680 people have gained employment. It's 42 now through the CSR team, with 750 participants who've gone along the volunteer pathway, and 1,200 of those 7,000 have entered into the education system. I'm not going to go through this because I think I must be near my 10 minutes, Shema, definitely. And so, yeah, that's just a few things why we are successful, and why we do have such a wonderful team, with the impact and the outcomes that we have. And just to finish off on a very, and I'm going to stop sharing as well, just to finish off on one of the stories as to why I absolutely love this programme. I have the pleasure of seeing the rewards and reaping the rewards. I used to be a police officer, and I spent 18 years in the police. So one of the team, or two of my team members, when they first came into our activities and I met them, I used to lock them up when I was a police officer. So to see somebody like him, and I've done warrants on his parents' house, so you know, that's a strange feeling when that person walks through into your activity and actually looks at you and says, I know you from somewhere. And you look at that person and you think, oh, yeah, you do actually. And he goes to everything from social services, probation, you name it, but he doesn't mention the police. So I didn't volunteer that information, but I'm not lying either. And then a few weeks down the line, he just sort of said to me, can I just say, if I've ever offended you in my chaos, in my bad days, that I'm really sorry. And that was a person from that day onwards became a natural volunteer. He's been with me 5 years now. He's been employed, and he's now a project lead and doing an amazing job out there. And I'm not being exaggerated when I say he's saving people's lives and has saved people's lives. So for me, I've seen the full circle of it. It's wonderful to be able to experience that. And that's why we're so passionate about it now, because we know it works. And that's why going into the prison and working the probation system now is why we want to do it, because we know that works. And that's why the team is so passionate about what they do. So thank you very much for listening to me, everybody. And that's me done. Has anybody got any questions?
Great, thank you, Jane. And it's lovely to hear about your work. And you know, it was great to see the success as well that's happening as well. I'm just trying to keep focus on the chat, but a quick question, because we want to have a panel discussion. One of the questions that came through our public advisor is, do you link in with the local community groups, or do you link in with social prescriber link workers and something like the local social housing?
So we link in with all of them, actually. So what we do, one of the things that to make sure the programme is sustainable, is we very much link in with local community activities, local community halls, local community clubs, the grassroots clubs. So we use their facilities. A lot of the times the tutors, etc., understand us better. And but then obviously for us, it's about them then becoming members, or using those premises more and more, and bringing in the family and friends to make them members. So yes, we do very much linking with the community service. Social prescribers, yeah. It's a new one for us, is the social prescribing, because social prescribers, whilst they're absolutely brilliant, they're only as good as the knowledge that they've got of the particular area. So we're on obviously a huge mammoth task at the moment of making sure that all social prescribers know about us. Yes, we're linking with all the different housing accommodation.
That's brilliant, thank you, Jane. And I think one last question was about the time of the programme itself. So since the participant kind of gets involved with your programme, what's the time period on that? Is there a limit to that, or?
No, far from it, because you know, they come into us, they can relapse, they might even reoffend again and get recalled, and then they come back out to us again. So the whole program is about giving people second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, however many chances that they need. Then we will work with them no matter what.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you, Jane. And I'd just like to say to everyone, if anyone has any more questions for Jane, please do put them in the chat, and hopefully we will have a chat later on. And yes, Jane, if you can send me that video, I could send it to everyone on this. So thank you. So our next speaker is not physically with us today, but he has sent an amazing video, and his name is Ash Nugent. And Ruth, if you don't mind sharing that video.
Just bear with me. I hope this is going to work. Just bear with me.
Yeah. Do you want me to try, Ruth, and see if I can share that? It's always like this. We always have technical problems in the virtual world.
We could change speakers, Shane.
Sorry.
And just get our next speaker on while that's being sorted out.
Yeah,
Doing
sure.
that.
Just to save some time.
Say
Have
that.
you got-
Sorry, Ruth, are you okay?
Yes. Can you not? Did not that not come through?
No,
It hasn't.
I can try sharing it and see if I can.
I can try again. Sorry, apologies, everybody. It worked in practice. It's just typical, isn't it? Do you want me to try again?
Yeah.
Let's try again.
Okay, we can see it.
Thank you, first of all,
Yeah,
to Art
we can hear it. Thank you.
for inviting me to speak briefly about the work that we do at Rise Up CIC. Sorry I can't be there in person, but if all has gone according to plan, then I will, at the time that you are watching this, be on a beach in Kefalonia, so, you know, never mind. So, Rise Up CIC, yeah, first of all, me. So, my name's Ashley Nugent. Friends call me Ash. You can call me Sir. But, you know, so Ash, well, I'm a writer and I'm a performer, and when I'm trying to pretend I have like a normal, sensible, grown-up life, I tell people I am one of the directors at Rise Up CIC. That's Rise Up spelt with a fist in the air. So if everybody say with me now, say Rise Up. Yeah, can you feel it? You feel the power of the fist. Yeah, you see. So I'm going to explain, first of all, why I came to setting up this company, Rise Up, and then what we do at Rise Up, and then I'll give you a little bit of idea of the kind of impact that this program has in prisons. So initially, well, let's go way back to the beginning. I found school very difficult. I had ADHD. I then found being harassed by the police very difficult in the late 80s, early 90s. From the time I was a teenager, I was getting harassed by the police a lot. You know, picked up, searched, arrested indeed for crimes that I hadn't even committed. Basically, racial profiling based on the way that I look, because I grew up in a small, leafy suburb where very, very, very few people look like me, my dad, my brother and sister. I then turned against all kind of authority. I fell out of love with school. I was very angry. I went to Jamaica at the age of 16 in search of a kind of identity and belonging, thinking I'll go where people look like me and therefore I'll fit in. That didn't quite work out. I ended up in Jamaican prison. Indeed, after 3 days of being in Jamaica, I'd been mugged and then stabbed and then arrested. And in Jamaican prison, I discovered that not only did I not fit in, but I was indeed, my nickname in the place I ended up banged up for a few weeks was White Boy. Indeed. So I came back. I had my 17th birthday in Jamaican prison. I came back and continued to get in more trouble now for crimes I had committed. Very angry. I guess it became what we call a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's like society had prophesied, thou shalt be like this. Petty criminal, uneducated, Dumbo. And I went, oh, I'll show you how to judge me in that way. I'll be a petty criminal, uneducated Dumbo. This is what happens, you see. So, you know, I was very angry. I was fighting all the time, arrested for all kinds of things. And eventually, the thing that turned it all around for me was just at 21 years old, deciding I had this burning desire to be honest about this thing that I like doing, this like secret that I had. It's like, I like writing poems. Poems and stuff. So I wanted to share my poetry, my creative ideas with the world. I went back to college. I met people in college who got me into rap. Started performing, eventually realised if I want to write things I need to read things, started studying hard every day, playing catch up with these very intelligent people I was now hanging around with, and I eventually got into university, left university with a first class degree in English literature, so left university, you know, at the top end of the scale, first class degree, after leaving school at the bottom end of the scale. So it interested me what was the difference there, 'cause I thought I couldn't do the education thing until I went back into education and found, well, I can do this. I can do this at least as well as anybody, better than most. So why couldn't I do it at school? So it's important to me to help other people understand that just because they are kind of labelled or made to feel a certain way about themselves by family, friends, or the state institutions, schools, police, social services, and so on, does not mean they have to stay stuck in that identity. Things can move on, things should move on, things should change, things should move. Anything that isn't moving is stagnant or dead. Keep moving, folks, you know. So I eventually I became what we call a community artist, using the rap, poetry, creative writing to help people in the community. And I wanted to get into prisons really because I felt like that I understand where the mindset is at for a lot of people in that situation where they would find themselves in prison. I've been there, I've lived that lifestyle, and I also know that I have learned certain techniques, mindset and state management that have allowed me to change, to move on, and to live the lifestyle that I really want to live, to be who I really am, to get the most out of life, to get the most out of the situations I find myself in. So things have changed massively for me now. I have a lovely lifestyle, a lovely wife and children. I have my book about being in prison in Jamaica, Locks, has now been picked up by Picador, so that will be published by Picador next year, next April. I've got all kinds of opportunities, writing opportunities, and I run this company, Rise Up CIC, and what we put together at Rise Up is a 12-session programme, and we deliver this in prisons all over the country. 12 sessions is based on the hero's journey, the kind of narrative arc that plays out in a lot of the great myths, and indeed a lot of the great stories, the modern myths that we live by today. Things like, you know, Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, Hunger Games, Moana, all kinds of movies and stories are based on this hero's journey arc. There's a challenge for the hero. They must dare to cross the threshold. they will be challenged, they will go into a big battle, they will symbolically die and be reborn, then they will return back home with the magic elixir that makes the whole world a better place in some way. So what we teach on the Rise Up programme are mindset techniques. They come from transactional analysis, understanding how we interact with each other, neuro-linguistic programming, techniques for how to manage your own mental and emotional state, mindfulness meditation. We teach aspects, simple kind of neuroscience, like how the brain works, what happens in fight or flight, how the central nervous system works, in simple ways that anybody can understand. So that once you understand what is happening, how emotions, thoughts and feelings, and indeed the way you hold your body, how all these are connected, and how to get the most out of what's happening in any given situation, how to get the most out of life, how to be the best version of you at any given moment. So within this, within the program, within the 12 sessions of the program, we take people on a journey, and we have found it to be a life-changing journey for many people. I'll read you some feedback in a moment, just before I finish up. We help people to understand what makes them tick, to understand that everybody wants the same things out of life, and the reasons they may have done dangerous things that are viewed as criminal, things that may have hurt themselves, hurt members of the family and then the community in the past, or just stupid, dangerous stuff, is because they are seeking the same things that everybody else is seeking. The reasons people do these activities are the same reasons that people are a doctor, a dentist or a nurse. We all want the same things out of life. But sometimes society, family, school and so on holds you back from feeling like you can attain those things. So for example, everybody wants to feel like they are good at something. If school makes you feel like you are rubbish at the thing that you are forced to go and do 5 days a week in term time, then you may indeed look for other ways of being good at something, which may just involve things that are dangerous or antisocial. But at least people now think you're good at something. You're Mr. Tough Guy or whatever it is. So when people start to understand this, they then understand, okay, these kind of things work, but only in the short term. So how do I get the things I want out of life in the long term? A sense of community, a sense of belonging, a sense of being good at something, a sense of achievement, a sense of enjoyment and fulfillment and peace and happiness in the long term. And we then teach techniques. So we work with artists. There's 2 practitioners at each session. The artist brings, we do visual, auditory and kinesthetic arts. There's movement, there's drama, there's making stuff, there's sound, there's music, there's sound therapy and classical music and rap music, there's poetry, there's creating things. So it's visual, auditory and kinesthetic. So you know, teaching brings people out of themselves. It gets them to be creativity gets people to be honest, and it builds rapport, and it creates a safe space, and it makes learning fun, and make sure the learning is deeply embedded within the unconscious mind as well as cognitively. So the programme is massively powerful. We've been all over the country doing it, as I say. I'm going to read you just a few little pieces of feedback that we have had over the years from prisoners who have attended our courses. So this was a female prisoner at HMP Style. She wrote on her feedback form, "I thought because of my crimes that my self-worth was gone. But I've learned to find the best person within myself. As a person, I certainly think I'm stronger and a more positive person through this course, and I'm going to prove myself to be that person and not think I'm weak and worthless, but strong and brighter." Rise up. Another one. So this guy, was he was a granddad. He'd been in and out of prison for the past number of decades. Using alcohol and drugs, and he stood up halfway through a kind of a session where we sat in a circle towards the end of the programme. He'd been very quiet throughout the programme, and he stood up and he said, "I've just realised what this is all about. I'm sick of being a weird old guy who's always in and out of prison." He said, I just want to be a dad and a granddad." And he wrote this: "I now find myself as a work in progress. As before the Rise Up course, I thought I was a bit of a lost cause. I never thought my mind, ideals and ideas could change so radically, but in a great way, for the change doesn't frighten me now. And this final one was from a guy who came from a crime family, who realised that his family had kind of pushed him into what he was doing. And he said to me, overall, I've learned a lot and realised I have the ability to change and overcome and achieve a great life. Can't tell you enough how much you've helped and changed my life. The best impact I've had in my life. Thank you. Rise up. And to finish with, I'm going to read you a creative piece that I wrote for a project I was asked to do by Writing on the Wall and Liverpool Lantern Company for a procession in Seldom Park, and they asked me to get some voices from the community. I said, indeed I will. I'll go to the prisons and do that. So I got some words from the prisoners, some poems, and then I wrote this piece based on the kind of stuff they'd said to me. And it goes like this: crime and expectation. Just like you, I crave for family, community and home. A little time to spend alone, be idle, contemplate and roam. And yes, I know you have your rules, and yes, I know I disobeyed. But if these needs are never met, please tell me, what did you expect? Did you like it when your mother made you feel like you were worth love, when your teacher said you were good, pinned your pictures and your words up? Yes, I know the schools have rules, and yes, I know I disobeyed. But if my needs were never met, I think back, what did you expect? Is it thrilling riding log flumes, loop-de-loop at Alton Towers? Does it feel right when a guy who looks just like you holds the powers and wears a badge and makes the rules? Those rules I know I disobeyed. But if such needs are not met by such rules, then what should we expect? So for now, I call these cold walls and this broken window home. Accept this toxic loneliness with no time on my own. And I accept that you have rules, and I know why I disobeyed. I understand my needs that went unmet and know what you expect. But unexpectedly in this community of bolts and bars, I've learned what schools refuse to teach. Rule makers too are made of stars. My character and qualities are worth as much as yours, and faith can transform fate and make resources of our scars. You need your rules to feel safe. We've made the game, agreed, let's play. You find it hard to understand people like me, and that's okay. But till the day that every child can strive and thrive and climb in woods, until the day that all rules affect the rich as much as they do us, until the day that every child can access high-class education, until learning draws out wisdom and impedes indoctrination, until work builds opportunities beyond staying alive, until politics and press serve us through truth, not them through lies, until divide and conquer tactics are anathema to leaders, until preachers all agree all people, tribes and gods are equal, until women don't blame men, until black people don't blame whites, and until white men learn to read the very histories they write, until communities and families and homes, until our minds are apt to act responsible and worthy of what we've designed. Until that day, we have no right to speak of punishment for crime. Until that day comes, we're required to speak of how to heal lives. And we all know that day's a long way off. If you still disagree, may I suggest you come and meet my friends who live in HMP. It is not you, but me, who has made sure my needs are met. I did all this, and what is more, survived, despite what you expect. Thank you. It's fallen down. Rise up. Thank you.
An amazing kind of creative piece from Ash, and amazing to hear those stories and feedbacks as well, and some of the great work that they do. And just to end with a beautiful poem. Ash is happy to receive any questions or comments. He unfortunately couldn't be joining us today, but Selena has put all the information on his information on the chat, so you can go through the web pages and get in contact with Ash. And without any further hold, our next speaker is Paul Walmsley, who is the Research Fellow in Children's Rights and Social Justice at Liverpool University. Paul?
Hi. Thanks for letting me follow that. Appreciate it. I felt like not only Ash, but also Jane before, they were both just describing my life. So I don't know, I didn't really know which angle to start from. And I think I'll go from an academic point of view at first. I think, you know, both of them were talking about the desistance theory. And although Jane was talking about sports and Ash is talking about, you know, the arts, they're both creative. And there's a huge, I think it's Professor Fergus McNeil who's got the Vox project up in Scotland. It's just phenomenal work. And I truly believe in that. And the only reason why I truly believe in that is because I am one of those people. Ash was talking about poetry, and my first night in jail, I wrote a poem, which then got me catapulted a year later into being a published author. And that just then spiraled upwards instead of spiraling out of control like my life had done beforehand. So yeah, I'm a children's rights researcher at Liverpool University. I'm also the youth and civic partnership broker in the university, which I think the job description is I disrupt and I join the dots. So it's my job to go and find all these projects in the communities and link them all together. But not only do I do that, I also have started my own project. So I've been out of prison now for 6 years. When I come out of prison, I was a tutor in the Jamie Carragher Sports and Learning Academy, where I taught 2 years in custody and a year outside of custody, sports psychology. So I know sort of the basis of what gets through to young people. And I left sort of the teaching world because I didn't want to judge people by academic value, because I think there's more to life than academia. Although I work in academia, I think there's different routes we need to take. And I think thinking on your feet is a skill. I think getting up late is a skill. I would love to be able to get up late and get away with it. I really, really would. And anyone who can do that and not be bothered about it, then hats off to them in my book. But I think I'm just going to try and link some of the things together here, what's being said, and especially about the rehabilitation, what Jane spoke about early doors. And so we run a project in Liverpool called NLB, which is Nobody Left Behind. And the last cohort of learners was 12 people who had just come out of jail and were deemed by probation that they needed to get a job. So it's a 7-week project where the first 4 weeks was boxing training. And not only do they do boxing, they go on hiking, they go on mountain biking over to Wales. So they only come 2 days a week to start with. And then it's the last 3 weeks. So we 5, 6, 7 is spent doing industry training, where they do their CSCS cards, their Cat and Jenny training, their health and safety training, and work ready training, and also site safe traffic management, which then gives them opportunity to work in construction and then to go maybe work on a civil engineering company as well. So out of 12 of them young people, 8 people finished the course, and 8 of them got jobs at the end of it, because we get them in front of employers. We don't call them interviews. To coin a phrase that and a bit of sort of learning that I done while I was in custody, what Ash mentioned before was neuro-linguistic programming, and part of NLP is to reframe things. And if you reframe, then you can hang any picture in any environment, and it will look right and it will sit right. And so I'm a firm believer in that. And going back to what Jane said as well early on, and also what Ash said, is that after I left the education system, I went to work in alternative provisions, not as a teacher, although I was a mentor and I did teach classes. But like any teacher who has to go in with a lesson plan, and I think a lesson plan is a load of tosh, by the way, because most people don't stick to it. It's just they never know what they're going to get in the room. So what I it was born out of necessity, realised that whatever these young people brought into me, that's how I would teach. And it would start with the first thing that they would say to me. And I was always say to them, what do you know? And as soon as you ask a young person, especially when they're in an alternative provision and they're coming in with all that baggage, it will put them on the back foot, but in a good way. And then that's how the lessons would start. Now, one of the first questions I would ask them is, would they get up and sing on karaoke? And the reason why I asked that is because, by the way, I'm a singer and a performer, and I've done all that and I love it, and give me a mic and I'm up there forever. But what I know after being obviously in jail and as a youngster and all that lived experience, but then teaching young people and then going into alternative provisions and spending 7 years in the education system, some while I was in custody, which is a bit wacky but true, is that young people who take themselves too seriously, and I think they're the ones that need the help, because they're the ones more likely to then, you know, give into peer pressure and be more susceptible to county lines and all the other exploitation that goes on in the area, because they'll just follow suit. You know, any psychologist in the rooms and see the Ash Lines test, it's easy for people, you know, in academia, if everyone was to say, oh, it's, you know, do A, when it's obviously you've got to do B. But if everyone's doing A, people will just follow that line. So I'd call it the karaoke test. And if they then, you know, presented and said certain things to me, I'd have to then spend more time with them to try and develop their ways of thinking, develop them into being good humans, and develop them in way of giving life lessons. So part of my role at the university is I run the Young Persons Advisory Group. Now, the advisory group is set up, I think we've got 15 young people at the moment from the ages of 13 to 19. And any research that's got any elements of children's rights or anything to do with children, when most research has, if you look at it somewhere along the line, then the researcher will put that through the lens of a young person to see if they can come up with any tips or advice. But what's been the theme over the past 3 years in all of these sessions, and I've been on, I'd say 95% of them, and I think we do about 7 a year, maybe more because we do internal ones, is that young people say that the gap between themselves and parents is huge. And they just don't understand. And the way I see it, and I think we've got loads of parents on the call, is that it's not our world, it's their world. I mean, I don't know, if I mention TikTok in front of my kids, they just laugh at me. You know, I don't think did you know adults are not supposed to talk about TikTok? We're not even supposed to go there. So it's understanding where the drivers are for these young people who are susceptible to end up in prison. The ones who are that 15% of cohorts in the school who I think get missed in primary school, then are farmed out to secondary schools. And by the time they're noticed by SEND, it's too late. They've developed the skills to be an agitator, to not want to conform in school, and then to do their own things and follow this peer pressure. And them, for me, are the ones that will end up in prison. Not all of them, but there'll be a small percentage of them. And so that's sort of why I do what I do. And going back to what Ash said before as well about being in Jamaica, so I'm going to tell you a bit of my life story. I've known, so you know now sort of what I do. So I was the youngest of 9 kids. I was brought up in Norris Green, Liverpool. I was a straight-A student right the way through school. My dad suddenly died when I was 14, 15. Instead of me going to university or play football or box because I was a great sportsman, I just went the other way. But, you know, we're talking mid-80s. And then I was at Hazel, I was at Hillsborough. I was just, you know, for all those psychologists out there and especially for the people who have been a case study for the past 7 years in all the universities across the Northwest, you know, suffering from PTSD and early years trauma. And I know Jane was mentioning about the Trauma Informed Network, which I do sit on in Lancashire as well. I know Justin really well, who runs that. And we're trying to do the same in Liverpool at the minute. So that's at the basis of being set up and being run. And I want to sort of join them dots and get the university involved in that. So then obviously we go to 1989 in Liverpool, and, you know, the ecstasy culture and the rave culture was there. So, you know, I'd just come home from, because Hillsborough happened in the April, and then the summer of love, whatever you want to call it, was 89. And yeah, I just went and took a few ecstasy and realised that, you know what, I feel great. I'm going to make everyone else feel great, and I'm going to make a few quid along the way and do it. And that just spiralled out of control, where I become a career criminal then, 25 years, to the point where in 2006, I was away, I'm a mad Liverpool fan, watching Liverpool Football Club, and my door got kicked in. I phoned home and just realised that, you know, it was serious, and I made the decision to go on the run. So hot-footed all over Europe and all over the world, spent some time in Jamaica, but not like, you know, Ash, who was talking, he went, not for a sense of belonging, he said. Well, neither did I. I just went to check out the weed fields there and see if I could get any weed on. And I did. So I lived all over the world for 6 years and just ran and ran and ran until 2011. And then, I'll be honest with you, prison was the best thing that ever happened to me. In 2011, I went and handed myself in. I was given a 10-year sentence, served 5 in and 5 out. The 5 in was the best experience I've ever had in my life. The 5 out was most probably the worst, because I think, in my experience and speaking to loads of people who've had that experience lately as well, that, you know, your sentence in the community is tougher than your sentence actually in the prison, because that's when reality hits you. Because when you're in that world in prison, you know, it's just regimented. You know what you're doing every day. You don't know what you're doing when you get out there. Anything can happen. You know, it's just, reality is much tougher than that life behind the door. So I think, you know, for me in jail, realising that, you know, I could achieve, I actually wrote my book, another one who wrote a book, another prisoner wrote a book, which became a bestseller, the Kessler Award winner. I think that sense of achievement just spurred me on. Actually, someone giving me some credit who didn't know me, someone who just read this book from a distance and come back and give me feedback. And I just started to then educate myself. So I've done, in 5 years, I've done 74 qualifications. I've done an NLP practitioner's course while I was in prison as well. 6 governors said I couldn't do it because it was a manipulation tool. But yeah, in the prison library, there was 6 books on it. So I read the books and then manipulated the system. I got my family to send the forms in. I filled it in, sent it back out to them, and I'd done it vicariously that way. And so it should have been a 2-year course, and in 11 months, I ended up becoming an NLP practitioner while I was in prison. I was helping the health service. I got into hypnosis. I got into meditation. I got into all different types of therapy. I love Gestalt therapy. So Fritz Perls is one of my heroes at the moment. And the reason why is because when I work with these young people, there's sometimes no time to fuss around. You know, we have to cut through all the fluff. And for me, Gestalt therapy does. It's just very abrupt and it's very in your face, and it gets to the point, you know, very directly. So I adopt all of that within my psyche, all the NLP, for when young people, you know, present to me. I think I've got a bit of a knack for picking up what they don't say. And especially people who get out of prison as well. And it's having that relatability. But I think the first thing I wrote down when Jane started speaking was relationships. Relationships are absolutely huge, especially in the prison system. You know, what relationship you have with your family, what relationship you have with the officers, what relationship you have with the education staff there, that will develop. That will develop even sort of a more sort of cognitive way of you to get out of that former sort of life you had. But it will also build better relationships moving forward. So, you know, I never believed in marriage. I think it was because, you know, because I'm from the youngest of 9 and all my brothers and sisters got married early doors. And obviously you hear all the arguments, and I don't think there'll be anyone on the call who's not from a dysfunctional family. I think we're all from dysfunctional families, and it's just, it's being aware of that, and I think awareness is a huge key moving forward, and especially for research. So I know we've got Shelley Cathers on the call later on, who came to me through one of the lecturers at Liverpool University in the forensic psychology department, where they give me students and ask me to try and help them shape their research and then put them in the right environments. So I believe that the research should be meaningful and we should get some benefits as a society out of it, and it should have some pathway into helping and shape policy and procedure in the future. And I suppose I can honestly put my hand on my heart and say, I don't know how I'm at Liverpool University. I don't know how this has transpired, other than me being persistent, other than me trying to do what I always thought was the right thing afterwards. And for coming from the background that I came from, because I think I was a high-end criminal at that time, and then to realise, to go, you know what, shove that behind me, I'm going to go that way now. And I thought I'd get a response off some of the lads who I used to be friends with, and I didn't. I got the opposite. And I remember bumping into one, and he said to me, Paul, if I ever go to jail, I'm going to do it like you done it. And I thought, okay, at least I'm doing something right, because if I'm getting people who are still active in that life and saying, if it happens to them, I'm going to follow your model, then that's cool. And I remember speaking to a prison governor. While I was in custody, I was allowed to speak at a reduce and reoffending event at the Hilton Hotel. And I told him that I have the model for rehabilitation and I have the model for success. And he said to me, that's impossible. And I said, well, no, it's not. You just watch. And so maybe this is one singular model now, but I know that I have maybe 10, 20 people who I was in jail with, and or, you know, maybe at different times, but who I try and help and mentor and steer them on the right path, you know. Right. So yeah, I think I've run out of time now.
Thanks, Paul. It's lovely to continue hearing you.
No. I'm sorry. I didn't realise. I never put my clock on, and I told you beforehand I can't talk.
Don't worry. Thank you so much, Paul. And it's lovely to hear, you know, both sides of how you've transitioned, you know, from you know, really being on the grounds and really experiencing that, you know, lived experience and taking it into action. And, you know, Rhiannon's mentioned comments on the chat as well, if you can read that, and Shelley as well, about how you're supporting these young advisors and being able to hear, you know, your work and organising that group, which is brilliant. I think one quick question was about when you mentioned about the rehabilitation kind of program. When does it start? Does it start prior to prison, or is it before prison or after prison? It was.
This is the NLB program, yeah.
Yeah.
The NLB is after, but we just don't do it with people who are on probation either, who's just left prison. We do it with care leavers, we do it with NEETs, and anyone in the area who's just trying to get on that job ladder, or looking for support, or looking for relationships. So I think over the last 12 months, we've got over 90 young people into employment. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. No, that's great, Paul. But I've got notes of other questions, but we can do that in the panel. I'm just focused on time. I know that we've got a break scheduled. First of all, thank you, Paul. That was amazing. And I was going to say that we've got a break scheduled for 5 minutes. So we are now on 2:05. Are we okay to be back for 2:10? If that's okay, just to give you a chance to just stretch your legs and grab some coffee or tea. And then we're back with our next speaker, which is Diane. Thank you, everyone. So we will continue with our next speaker, and it is Diane Curry that is with us today. And I would like to, without further ado, Diane, I'd let you introduce yourself. I think that would be better.
Yeah, thank you very much. And what amazing speakers already we've listened to this morning. So there is that phrase about follow that ×3, but I'll do my best. My name's Diane Curry, and I'm the chief exec of an organisation called POPS, Partners of Prisoners. And the name obviously suggests what we do. We support primarily prisoners' families. But before I go into what we do, why we do what we do, I suppose a little bit of history. POPS was founded in 1988 as a result of my previous experiences of supporting my then husband through, unfortunately, numerous custodial sentences. At that time, he was one of the most chaotic drug users I've ever come to meet, either personally or professionally. And obviously funding his drug habits was a major priority for him. And that come, unfortunately, with committing multitude of crimes on a regular basis. It was a lifestyle that was alien to me, but it was, at that moment in time, it was something I was prepared to try and work with him to reduce, to minimise, to eliminate. Unfortunately, that never occurred. Well, not many, but a few years later, the marriage did fail. But before that happened, I unfortunately again had to visit many prisons across the Northwest. And founding POPS was my predecessor's initiation, if you like. She was supporting her then partner through a custodial sentence for different reasons than me. But what we realised when we came together was that as family members, we hadn't committed any crime. Crime wasn't part of my family structure, my family unit, other than through my married relationship. And to be honest with you, prison was respite for me in those days. My lifestyle living with my partner, my husband, was very, very chaotic, as you can imagine, through those processes. So when custodial sentences came about, I'll be honest, it was respite. It felt like respite. But trying to maintain that relationship, trying to work with my husband to make different choices, changes, to get the help actually that wasn't forthcoming in the late 80s, early 90s, was my priority at that stage. So visiting prisons as I did with young children, it brought, even though it was respite, it brought with it another set of issues. Visiting prisons in the late 80s, early 90s wasn't pleasant. Visiting prisons are not pleasant. They're not pleasant today. But they certainly wasn't pleasant then because the decency agenda didn't exist. So families, myself and others, we had to visit our loved ones in a situation that was dire. We were not treated with any respect. In fact, we were seen as collusive with whatever crime our loved one had committed because we were supporting them. There were no visitor centres in those days, so we did stand outside in the rain, queuing up the side of prisons. There was no transport that was affordable for us at that stage. Prison staff attitude was diabolical towards us in those days. They would openly, talk about us as being as bad as, if not worse, for putting up with our loved ones' behaviour in a very derogatory manner. Prison staff were openly racist in those days. Many prison staff, and I say many because it was more than a few, openly wore their National Front allegiance badges on their lapels. So it was a different world, but it was a world that myself and my predecessor, Frida Anderson, recognised we didn't need to put up with. So we got together very briefly, and I'm trying to cut short a long period of time and move on to some other points, but we got together and we founded ourselves a prisoners family support group, i.e. POPS, which we still are named today. But we didn't have the position of the staffing or the contracts or delivery models we had today. We got together because we needed support for each other. We were a self-help group, in essence, and we met in either mine or Frida's kitchen. And slowly but surely we built up a resistance. And I think this is the whole, for me, this is the whole thing, the whole concept of user voice and lived experience is it's not enough just to have a voice. It's got to be a voice that actually offers or challenges or supports some other agenda. And for me, at those days, it was resistance. We were resisting the negative situation that we were dealing with. And so the main reason for us coming together in those days was to actually increase a decency agenda, to set one in relation to visiting conditions. And again, cutting that long story short, 34 years later, we can actually say as an organisation and a group of individuals, and with others, of course, across the country, we did influence massively the whole approach to people visiting prisons, to children visiting prisons, to services that should have been available but wasn't, but are now, to the fact that you can get advice and support and you can be included sometimes where appropriate into your loved one's journey through the process. So just to build that little bit of historical factor is that POPs were founded on user experience. They were founded on the fact that we weren't happy with how we were being treated. We gathered ourselves together. We brought in other people who also agreed with us at that stage. And if I'm totally honest, it probably wasn't until the Strange Ways riots, as it was then, HMP Manchester as we call it now, it wasn't until the riots really that we would be actually listened to. It took another kind of lived experience approach, i.e. unfortunately the rioting in the prison, to actually get the spotlight on, okay, what were the issues for men in that case in the prison. And although it was their conditions, it was their lack of decency that was bringing things to the fore. So it was their conditions, it was their lack of toiletry facilities, etc. But it was also how it was the system was treating their families. Families are vital to all of us. And I think, like Paul alluded to, they're vital even more so to people who are separated from them and forced. So if prisoners' families were treated badly by the staff and the system itself, then obviously prisoners were going to, at some stage, in the midst of all that other angst that led up to the riots, was going to actually include how their families were treated in their demands for getting things right. So I have to say it took something else other than just a voice to get us catapulted into a place where we were listened to. So that was the history bit of it, if you like. I suppose, again, and I spoke to Shayna and Selena before I agreed to come on this this kind of event today, around prisoners having voices that are seldom heard. And it's not that I disagree with that in principle, but I had to disagree with it in some aspects, because to be fair, I think prisoners are heard because of the variations of engagement they have with individuals, with groups. What happens is they're not listened to. And I think there's a subtle difference. You know, prisoners, they're researched, they're consulted, they're interviewed, they're assessed on a regular basis. Academics, and with greatest respect to all the academics in the room today, but academics apply daily to go into prisons and to speak to those who are in custody and to find out more about their lives, their regimes, their needs, their requirements, what led them to that stage. So being heard, actually, for prisoners, in my view, isn't the issue. For me, the issue is about, once you've heard us, and families included in that, what happens then? Are you really listening? And if you're really listening, are you then going to act upon what you hear? And if you do act upon what you hear, then there's a potential for change. And I do believe, again, going back to some of the broader matters that have been raised this morning, user voice, lived experience, it's only valid if it really does contribute either to a personal change, an organisational change, or a political change, and the different variations and steps that we all have to take to get to those stages. Sorry. POPs itself, as an organisation, like I say, Frida has retired 10 years since, but I'm still here with my personal experience. But my personal experience is past, thankfully. But it's really vital that we class ourselves as a user-led organisation. And so to do that, we have to maintain constant engagement with those who are still, for whatever reason, going through the process that I was going through when we founded POPs. And it's not that I can say it's better now. It's different now visiting prisons, but because of the conditions have improved. What's not changed massively is the feeling associated with losing your loved one to a criminal justice system, to a prison establishment, that forced separation, that barrier between yourself and your relationship, especially with your children. And I suppose one of the biggest things that kind of still haunts me a little bit is we have made massive changes. I'd like to believe that user voice, lived experience can and does do that. But it still narks a little bit that we are still trying to get the prison service and other associated agencies to resolve and fix the most basic processes that families still experience, that I experienced 34 years ago. So again, it depends on who's listening, whether we're heard or not. If we fit the political agenda at that time, then we'll be heard. And I can give you examples of that. So, for example, we've been involved in some major political consultations, discussions, where we've had a chance not only for me with my previous experience, but where we brought families, current families who experiencing supporting somebody through a sentence now, where we brought them to very high political tables. And I don't do that lightly, because there's nothing worse than asking families and preparing families and supporting families to go into those quite intimidatory forums, to be fair, when you've got ministers and where you've got high-level government departmental leaders, to share what's something that's very personal to them. If you feel that really they're going to say, thank you very much for that, that was very interesting, and nothing changes. And I suppose my message today to everyone in the room is that if we are going to really value the lived experience and the user voice, if we are going to attract people to take part in our academic research or our policy consultations, then they need to be fully supported, they need to be fully resourced, and they need to feel that their contribution to that process is going to make a difference. And I have to be honest again, sometimes that happens, and I'll come back to where that has been a successful process, but a lot of the time it doesn't. Families very often report back to me, especially when I ask them to get involved in things for all the right reasons. They come back to me and say, it doesn't make any difference, Diane. How many times again have prisoners been asked to get involved in this and get involved in that, to share their experiences, and then whoever it is that wants to know leaves the building and they don't feel the difference, certainly not in their time where they're in prison, etc. So I think we have to look at being honest and open and transparent with the people that we want to engage with. We want to harness their experiences, but we have to be asking ourselves, what do we want to harness them for? And I think there are lots of different ways we can do that. But again, the biggest thing, POPs this year, obviously COVID impacted massively on visiting prisons. In fact, for 18 to 19 months out of the 24 months where COVID restrictions were in place for prisons, there was no visits whatsoever. So families were completely isolated and completely unsupported by some of the organisations. What we did is that we tried to say, use that time to give people a voice, and we operated a regular forum called Get It Off Your Chest, because in essence, sometimes that's all families want to do. They don't want to change the world necessarily, or they don't feel they can at that point change the world. What they want to do is have an opportunity to voice their experiences, their frustrations, their anxieties. So Get It Off Your Chest is a very apt title for those regular forums, especially during COVID. But that wasn't enough. Giving people an opportunity to get it off their chest was valuable to them particularly, but it wasn't enough to POPs as an organisation. And when we took the idea back to them that actually there's something else here, there's information that people need to know. We've never experienced COVID lockdown before. It's a new separation from your loved one on top of the current separation that you're already experiencing. And so we need to garner and harness the information that you're sharing. And obviously we had to get their agreement to do that. Went back to them, they agreed. And the only thing I could say to them, because again, it's about honesty, it wasn't that they were going to change the world necessarily, but we had a right to put our issues, our collective issues about visiting and maintaining contact with a loved one during COVID, right to the very top of the tree. Because it's only if we can get our experiences right to the very top of the tree can we sometimes make that big difference, especially in the large bureaucratic organisations such as the prison service, etc. And so, put a long story short, we said, if you agree to come along on this journey with us and continue to share, we will get you access to the people who can make a difference. And they agreed through that process to do that. So basically, again, keep reducing a lot of information to a shorter bit of information. We managed to get Phil Coppell, who's the current Director General, as we used to call them, head of the prison service, to come online and to meet with the families and to listen to them and for them to share their experiences, to raise their questions, etc. Now, this has not been done before, but in essence, he was under a bit of pressure, Phil, and he's a good guy, you know what I mean, but he was under pressure politically because COVID wasn't just a prison service matter, it was a political matter, and it was a health matter as well. In essence, what the families did is they got the chance to as what we all need is to raise their issues with the person that they felt could actually do something about it. what we realised then, and I should have realised probably a bit sooner, is that actually the head of the prison service couldn't do anything about that particular circumstance because it was being led by government and by Public Health England, and he himself was having to respond accordingly to people. But the ongoing story to that is that, okay, we didn't quite get it right there. They got a chance to speak to Phil Coppell, but we've not really made massive inroads. But we decided to carry on because then we went to the Public Health England Director for Justice, and he agreed also to speak with us. And from that, we were going to go to ministers, etc. But then, fortunately, COVID, then the restrictions have been reduced. But families got a little bit frustrated through that process, basically because even though they had a voice, even though they were being heard, there's something about trust. They didn't hear what they didn't accept what they were hearing back. They didn't trust the messages that were coming back to them. And that's something we also have to bear in mind, is that we can say that your information or your contribution is going to do this. But I think certainly with prisoners and their families, we have to offer them a little bit more of a building trust. We have to be able to say to them that trust is a really important matter. We've also done other reports that was user-led, a record of our own with the Zayed Mubarak Trust and the Traveller Movement, again looking from a BME's perspective around what COVID meant for families. Again, one of the bigger pieces of work we got involved with where families were integral to advising and sharing their information was with Lord Farmer and the Farmer Review, which is still held up as being the one piece of research, government research, of course, that is making some day-to-day differences to people's journey through the criminal justice system and to families' journey through the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
But there is something about when you do have a voice, something about, do people hear what they want to hear and disregard the rest? And again, these are some of the frustrations that families say to us, well, Phil Coppell took this away and Lord Farmer took that away, but he didn't take all of this. And we have to, again, come through a process of how we work with families when somebody takes something that's important, but there's a whole host of other stuff that they decided that they're not taking that. It doesn't fit their particular agenda, etc. So I think there is something around when we engage with people, individuals, particularly through the justice system, that we recognise that we have to share the status. And families sometimes don't feel that that's the case. They feel they are kind of, they're not active participants, if you like. They're just used for an extraction of information that satisfies somebody else's agenda. And that may not always be true, of course, but again, that's where the mediation, the liaison between an agency like POPs can actually support families to say, we may not get everything that we need, but there's nothing worse than not trying, or there's nothing worse than not having your say. And so we are an advocate for the engagement. As opposed to me, and again, I'm wary that we are slightly behind time, so, but as opposed to me, one of the biggest, and it's been reconfirmed or affirmed this morning, listening to Paul and the video from Ash and from the lady this morning, whose name was Jane. Yeah. It's been reaffirmed that where massive change occurs, it's normally where people who've had a lived experience do something for themselves, i.e. POPs. We did something for ourselves, and POPs now provides services across the Northwest. We like to think we're influential. We have had some wins. Paul talks about where he is in his journey now, but he was doing something for himself initially. Ash talks about doing, he set up Rise, doing something for himself. And some of the biggest changes in the justice system have come from individuals who have collectively gathered other individuals, and we've done something for ourselves. We haven't been the inactive, kind of recipient of that voice. We've actually activated our own voice.
And that's brilliant. That's brilliant, Diane. I mean, sorry to cut you short on that.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you so much. But I think you've highlighted really important points, and I think everyone's commenting on the chat as well about this. But definitely, it's about really taking that voice and not just, and especially also the combination itself. I mean, sometimes, like you said, looking at prisoners, but no, forgetting those family members who are, being part of this journey with their loved ones. So it's important to kind of really hear those voices and how to take those voices forward. And you've given like beautiful examples about really empowering those voices to be heard, in so-called what we call the hierarchy or the pyramid, but you're trying to really empower those voices, and I think that's beautiful to hear. I think there is some comments on the chat as well, if you were to see through that, Diane. But what I'll do is I'll move on to Steph, and then hopefully we can get a chance to kind of have a chat later on if we can manage some time. And I know we're short on that, but thank you so much, Diane. That's really been insightful. Steph is our public advisor who's been with us in the ARC, and she'll be sharing some of her lived experiences in being a volunteer, and basically seeing people fall through the gaps of our system. Steph, if you're still around with us.
Yeah, hi. Another role I have is a community volunteer in a social supermarket stroke food bank. And when people come and join our social supermarket, they have to produce some identification, whether it be a letter or some form of other identification. But some people present to our community, our social supermarket, with no ID. They've just that morning come out of prison. So the only ID they have is a prisoner ID card. So they've come out with no food. Some have still got properties because they've served short prison sentences. So social housing have kept properties open because there's not enough rent deficit to sort of warrant court proceedings and things like that. We also have people who have come out of prison and have been housed locally, but with no support networks. You might have a letter from the probation service to basically say, present this at the social supermarket and they'll sort you out with food, or with the local food bank. For us, unfortunately, that's not a form of ID. That's a letter from the probation service to the person released from prison to try and access support networks within their community where they've been housed or where they live. So then we have to sort of make further investigations with either direct support via the food, the Big Help Project, or the Trust of Trust, to sort of get voucher numbers so we can actually present with food parcels. And alongside the letter from the probation presenting at the social supermarket for food support, often there's 2 or 3 people living in the same house. So it could be a normal 3-bedroom house, but room 1, room 2, room 3, which is fairly new to the area I represent, which is Knowsley. And each individual live together, but they want to be treated individually. So it'll be food for one, food for another, food for another. But there's one person who wants to be the cook for everybody, who they were a cook before they went to prison. When they very first present to us, they'll present every week, twice a week, including food bank day for food. Clean, sober, well presented, full of engaging conversation, and really keen to ask if they could have the odd extra bag of pasta or the odd extra tin of this or tin of that. And then slowly, as they present, there's the smell of alcohol on their breath, or there's behaviour that becomes not a challenge to us, but a challenge to others who are in the line waiting to access the social supermarket. Specifically food bank, because food bank can be quite a challenging time for people, really. And we have to be super diplomatic. There's also, they'll go to the job centre to restart the reclaim for benefits. And some of them haven't even got an email address, and to claim universal credit, you need an email address to access a journal. So they'll again present at the social supermarket with no idea how to access an email address, or access debt advice, or mental health support, or just food support, or just general well-being support. And that's where we tend to come in. Our social supermarket tends to become a one-stop shop of all kinds of services that, being community volunteers, we know that we can signpost, or we can sign up, or we can sign to some in-house support from the social landlords. But I think the gap, what Seamus talks about, is the landlord will hand the probation service the keys to the property where the ex-offenders are going to live, but that's it, carry on and get on with it. That's not necessarily the case, because the landlord should follow through with support to places like the social supermarket or the food bank. Often they don't. They may say in conversation to the probation officer, this is what they can access, but often that gets lost in transition, really. We get a lot of people who have been rehoused from prison with absolutely nothing apart from a roof over their head, and we're asked to put them together food parcels and support packages, but they've got no cooker, no microwave, no toaster, no kettle, and that's extremely really difficult to give somebody a food parcel specifically from a food bank, which consists of ambient food for 3 days, which is tins and packets. So then we have to sort of diversify and use our social supermarket, because we access things like overflow of pastries and cakes from suppliers like Marks and Spencer's or Greggs, the bakers. So we'll always sort of have a basket aside to support them types of people. My point being is, if the system, if they've come out of a very organised system, prison, and then they're let back into the big wide world, and they might still have a property, but they've got nothing else. They've got no support to get them into, whether it be a drug and alcohol system to stop them going back into the addiction, or mental health support, or even just general food. And I think the letter that they present to us, maybe from a job centre, probation officer, or just themselves with their ID of a prison identification card. Some of them are at absolute rock bottom. They don't know where to turn, what to do. Some of them are housed in an area that they don't know nothing about. They don't know where the local dentist is, doctors is, where the local bank or local Aldi or Lidl, which is a bigger supermarket which offers a wider variety of food. Even in-house support services often aren't identified to these people as well. Our social landlords or housing landlords, councils as well, have in-support services that enables tenants to sustain a tenancy by going through benefits. Are they getting all they're entitled to? Are they getting the right support mentally, physically, for well-being, and even just opportunities to become involved within that community, volunteering opportunities, well-being opportunities. Is the community groups within the area where they've been rehoused, that there might be something they might like to take part in, whether it be horticulture, whether it be cooking, whether it be rambling. And I think being a volunteer I'm not saying on the front line, but I think our social supermarket with the demands of society is really, the demand is massive. And I would say we present with at least 40% of new community within our community who are ex-offenders, from all ages, from very young to older, middle-aged men to women, and to youth as well, who have been housed within our area or within the local area, because you can access a social supermarket if you don't live in the immediate area where you live. You can access anyone within the Liverpool area. They're just lost. They seem lost. They think the letter that they're being given by their probation officer gives them access to everything, and it doesn't give them access to nothing apart from signposting where they need to come for their food parcel to last them a few days. It doesn't tell them they can come twice. They need other forms of identification. It doesn't tell them they can use one on their doorstep on another day of the week that R1 is not open. And I think it's vitally important that the connections that are not there need to be more connected. There needs to be a more fluid line of support in place for people coming out of prison to be able to access support networks, whether it be furniture packages, food packages, and all very, very strongly and importantly, support packages for mental and physical well-being as well, and specifically addiction. We find very quickly within, I'd say, 6 to 10 weeks, that the people who are persistently presenting themselves at our social supermarket or food bank do smell quite strongly of alcohol, and it's either a free food parcel and the few pounds I've got left would get me enough alcohol to get me through the day. So it's difficult for us being frontline volunteers because we're not claiming to be skilled in everything. Some of it is these people are some that are presented are victims of domestic violence as well. So we know how to sort of escalate that up the chain, but some really flummox us with what they've been told by probation, what they've been told by the job centre, and we need to generate our own paper chain that needs to be correct. But it's a missing link that needs to be connected to all support packages or services that are available for these prisoners coming out of prison to be rehabilitated within the community. Everyone deserves a second chance, but they also need that right support network to enable that and enable them to flourish and move forward within their lives. Very difficult, but that's what we experience in our community, especially a volunteer in a social supermarket or food bank. That's me. I didn't have no script. That's just what I experienced day in, day out, really.
Oh, that's brilliant, Steph. And you've highlighted really, really important points. And, you know, echoing what Paul has mentioned about, you know, not the challenge of being in prison, but also the challenge of being out of prison and coming back into the community and how they are supported within the community, and the resources that are available. And definitely for you as volunteers, you know, you can feel the burden of them falling through the gaps of the system, you know, where the support is not really, you know, appropriately delivered to individuals to support them to get back into their normal lives, what we so call normal. But thank you so much, Steph. That's really insightful to kind of hear your thoughts and your experience of that. I'm just cautious of time, otherwise I've got loads of questions to ask every one of you. But I'll move on to our last speaker, Shelley, and then hopefully we can have a chance to ask any questions. But thank you so much, Steph.
Yeah, it's been lovely to hear from everybody today. I've really appreciated everybody's insights. Just a bit about me. I'm a PhD student at the Uni of Liverpool. So I'm studying child criminal exploitation and basically how it affects families, the young people, professionals that work in that area. And to be honest, I could give a complete hour talk just on that. So I'm going to just cut that brief. If you have questions, just send me a message and we'll talk more in depth about it. But the reason that I've come to speak today is because I volunteer at an alternative education provision in Liverpool. So for anybody that doesn't know what an alternative education provision is, it's basically for young kids that have been excluded from everywhere else, or they don't fit into mainstream education. It could be because they've got behavioural issues. It could be because they've got learning difficulties that prevent them from being in a busy classroom with loads of kids. It could be because they've been involved in criminal activity, that they've been ill and they've missed a substantial amount of school. The list could go on and on and on. But the one that I volunteer in is specifically, I guess, for kids who've been excluded because of behavioural issues, because they're involved in gangs, because they need that extra bit of support, or I don't want to use the word monitoring, but that they're more suited to be on a one-on-one or a small group environment instead of being in a busy classroom. So you're probably wondering how a wee Irish girl has ended up in the middle of Liverpool working in an alternative provision. It's because I came over to do my master's at Liverpool Uni, spoke to my supervisors all about what I wanted to do, told them I wanted some hands-on experience to make sure that the job was for me and make sure that I was for the job. And I got put into contact with a lovely Scouser called Paul Walmsley. So Paul was very keen to get me on board and keen for any young person. So if there's anyone on the call that is looking for some experience, definitely shoot him a message, because he is an advocate to help each other out and to promote good practice in whatever area you're in. But I started in the little provision and was there a week or two maybe, and I called Paul and said, I don't know if it's for me. I feel a bit like an outsider. And to this day, that is how those first couple of days went for me. I felt as though I had nothing to connect with these Scouse lads about. I didn't know the slang. I didn't know what areas they were referring to. I just was an outsider. I was coming from a completely different background. They were saying stuff like, oh, he's got a cob on, and oh, he's going to be in late, he's at the Aussie. And I was sitting like, what are they on about? What the freak is an Aussie? But you have to kind of just acknowledge those differences. And it kind of got to one stage, I can't remember what the word was, but I might have called somebody a scally or something like this. And I says, whoa, what are you on about? Like, what is this? I have no idea what you're talking about. and they just found it hilarious that I had no idea what they were on about. So I've never got slated so much in my life by a group of teenagers, but you just have to take it on the chin, because those little differences that we had definitely helped us to build rapport in the long run. And now I can walk in, and if I say something they don't know, and if they say something I don't know, we just laugh and get on with it. So a lot of the time I think we focus on, and which all the speakers have said today, which has been great, you know, sharing our experiences like Paul has, and shared our lived experiences, but also like, it's okay if we don't have those experiences to share and you want to get involved working with this group. If you don't know, you don't know. So as well as working with in the alternative education provision, I work in an approved premises for the probation service. So an approved premises is basically if offenders are coming out of prison and they're not ready for a home environment life, or if they're on certain license conditions that they need to be monitored, then they come to us and we just give them a bit more support and help them get on their feet. So all the problems that Steph is talking about, I have seen firsthand. They don't know where local things are. They're often sent to places in a neighbouring area that they don't know. Some of them don't have like a national insurance number, any form of ID. So we're the people that are supposed to be able to help with all those issues. So Steph, I've sent you a message that we can talk about how we can make sure that the right information is being communicated across. But in those type of situations, I'm working with people that hopefully, touch wood, I'll never have to have gone through what they've gone through. And it's unfortunate that if they had been born into my life, they could have very easily been in my shoes. And that's something that it's important to acknowledge, that we are different. But if I show that I genuinely care and I'm genuinely there to help, then hopefully they'll trust me enough to bridge that gap, and that we can cooperate and work well together. So you're probably thinking, what is the link between prisoners, offenders, and an alternative education provision? So the reason that I wanted to mention my work in the alternative provision is because young people who attend these schools are 6 times more likely to be involved in a gang, and unfortunately everything that comes along with that. So the criminal behaviour, the, I guess, antisocial behaviour, if you want to call it that, and 37% of these children are cautioned or sentenced to a serious violence offence while they've attended an alternative education provision. And that was just reported in a report in 2022. So that's a new up-to-date figure. So all of these links, the questions ask is how we can help these young people to make sure that they don't continue or spiral into that world of criminality. And one of the main things that I found, I did a project on how to build trust with these young people. It was only last year, but it feels like a lifetime ago. But one of the main things that I found was young people in these schools love hearing from mentors. They love getting first-hand experience. They love people that's coming in and saying, I've been in your shoes, this is what happened to me. And kind of, they take it better from people that's been in that position than they do take it from just a teacher or a classroom assistant like me. So I have a couple of little quotes that I wanted to share. So one of the young people said, I was in trouble with the police. So, also I should say, I don't want to mention any specific names, but Paul is a mentor, so you can put 2 and 2 together. But one of these young people said, I was in trouble with the police. So the teacher got mentor in to speak to me. He told me everything about the life. He took me to a boxing ring, and on the drive he spoke about what he had done, how he went on the run, and everything in between. I think not only because the teacher trusted him, but also because of how he spoke to me and the things that he was telling me, I automatically trusted him and I respect him. Since then, I've been in and out of custody suites more than I want to admit, but who do I call? I still go back to ex-mentor. So things like that, like he may not know for himself the right things to do or the right things to deal with it, but he's got somebody that he can turn to and somebody he can go to for advice and just say, what do I do? And I have more quotes, but I'm conscious of time, so I'll not go into them all. But the kind of recommendations, if there's anybody on the call that is, it's for practitioners as well, but anybody on the call that's interested in doing research, I was fortunate enough that before I went to do my research project, I had the opportunity to build rapport with these young people. You know, I spent a good probably about 6 months working in the school before I then went and did any form of interviews, or before I even asked if they'd be interested in interviews. And that was a huge benefit, because it allowed me to see the true them, and them to kind of get to know me before I was just demanding anything off them. But one of the young people did report when building rapport with authority figures, he said it's hard to build trust with anybody, especially in a custody suite, because you're branded as a criminal as soon as you're in there. So for me, it's quite disheartening that these are teenagers. Like the young fella that said that was only about 14, 15, and he thinks of himself as a criminal. And it's the type of thing that Ash was talking about, the self-fulfilling prophecy, that hopefully if we can kind of show that they are something else, show that they are a footballer, that they are an artist, that they are a brother, a sister, whoever, then we can give them a bit of more of a priority rather than focusing on the negatives. The other wee things that I just wanted to mention before I finish up, because I'm conscious of time, is something that Diane meant, which I completely agree with, is you need to say, not only like listen to the person, but actually activate that finding. So in research as an academic, that's something that we focus quite heavily on. It's something that I've been pulled up on, to say you can't just leave it as an academic paper, you need to make something happen. And it's important that whoever you're going to interview, or whoever you're speaking to, wherever you're finding this information, that they know what they're getting themselves in for, and that they're comfortable with that. Because often, you know, I could do an interview with a prisoner or a young person, and they could be quite happy to share it with me, but they might not want the world to know. So it's something that before you collect any data or information from somebody, say exactly how it's going to be shared. So young people, whenever I did the project with them in the alternative provision, they were told, you know, that your information might be used in future conferences, it might be used in presentations with other professionals. So they'll know that I'm able to share it here because they agreed to that. So one of the things is just to be clear on what's expected of them and of what they can expect from you. One of the young people had said to me, I'd have no trust in you if I told you something, then you told anybody else. That's not fair. If you need to share it, or if you tell me you're going to share it, that's a different story. So it just summarizes up everything that, you know, I'm going to say. So making sure that they know how they're going to share it. And then through my work, it's a lot of practitioner reports and emails and documents and presentations like this that allows us to get that information out there. And I think little forums like this is extremely important and invaluable for researchers and practitioners to actually share the information. And, you know, it gives me the opportunity to know, okay, Diane's doing this and Paul's doing that and Ash is doing this, and it allows us all to work together. So I just want to say thanks for the opportunity to come on and speak, even if it was whizzed through. And if anybody has any questions, please get in touch, because it is only through communicating like this that we can make things a bit more smoother and better in the future. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Shelley, and thank you for joining us as well today. And you've emphasized a really important point that Diane was really emphasizing, is about really when you're going in there and looking for participants, they're not just participants that, you know, that we consider as numbers. You know, we've filled our saturation, but you really went in there and you know, created a repertoire with those individuals, understanding their world, understanding your world as well, and then following that and you know, really taking that value of their voices and utilizing it in the best way forward, which is brilliant. So it's lovely to see that as an example where Diane just had highlighted it as an issue, which is brilliant. So I have to say thank you to all our speakers. I know we've so I should have stuck the time, but I think it's been brilliant hearing from everyone. So I think there's lots of information has been shared in the chat. There's also links that have been shared meaning to, like, for example, emails and web pages. We will be sharing that as well on our NHS Futures workspaces. So if anyone wants to continue this discussion as well with any of the speakers, that you could do that through that as well. So just before we finish off, I'm thinking just to go to our speakers and say, what would you like to be the you know, the final message that you would like to give the audience? And our audience are a variety of researchers, public members, and partners who work within the NHS, local authorities and third sector and charitable organisations. What would be the message for you for us to kind of take away from our discussion today? And with that, I don't know, I'm just looking at Paul, so I'll just go for Paul straight away.
I think, because I just wrote down something when Shelley was speaking about the differences between people and spotting them. But for me, one of the big things that I do quote, I'm just two quotes, what makes us all the same is that we're all different. And so knowing and understanding that, and also it's your biggest quality is your biggest weakness. They're the same things, and it's understanding that. And so making the people around us understand that as well will make us all work a lot better. And everyone needs to join the dots, like we're joining the dots here. We still need to reach out and join the dots.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Paul. And Steph? Steph, you're on mute.
It's about signposting and supporting and encouraging independents to seek that support that's available within their community.
Thank you. Diane?
Yeah, sorry, I've got a couple. So the overarching is to leave a legacy, whether it's academic research or consultation. It has to leave something behind, even if it's something just one point that's going to be raised or actioned. And acknowledge that people, they share their stories to hopefully make things better for someone else, if not for themselves. So there's a responsibility there as well. Yeah, that will do. Leave a legacy and acknowledge the responsibility.
Brilliant. Thank you, Diane. And Shelley?
I think mine is just, I guess, reach out to other people. If you don't know, like what Steph mentioned, if I don't know, if I'm not as a probation worker, if I don't know what I'm sharing, reach out and make sure I'm sharing the right information. If there's other people that's able to help, like Diane's group, then reach out and say, you know, how can we get involved and how can we network with one another? Because I think so much of what we do is just communicating with each other, figuring out what other people's doing and building upon that constantly. It's like there's never a stopping point with research or practice. It's constantly just going and going and going. So yeah, I think just find out people in similar areas or people that's able to help. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you so much to all speakers. I know Jane Moodie had to leave and Ash is not with us, so I do appreciate that. Selena, anything that you would like to add before we
I just wish we had another hour to actually discuss together. I just want to say a massive thank you to all of our speakers. I just think there's been so much sort of wisdom shared, and we will be sharing the recording, so you know, maybe it's something that we can follow up on. I always hate leaving these things and not being able to sort of tie up all those loose ends, so we will share a blog and hopefully we can continue the conversations. Thank you, everyone.
Nahid?
No, brilliant. Just echoing what everybody else said, and I totally agree with Selena. I think I would just like to say this is the most valuable one, so much contribution that we've had so far. It was just so interesting. You know, hopefully we'll continue the discussion, and you know, it's just an endless discussion that we could have. And from a judiciary point of view, it's just so interesting to hear both sides. I see a completely different one side, which hopefully I'll be able to put on the NHS futures. But thank you, everyone. Absolutely brilliant.
Thanks.
I think that's just, you know, the humanity comes out, you know, hearing these stories, you break down that barrier of thinking that, you know, that could never be me. It could always be any of us. So, you know, I think thank you everyone for sharing that.
Definitely. I think it's been a really, really interesting kind of Seldom Heard forum, and I think we definitely need to take it further and explore it more. We did hope to have a panel discussion, but we've had so much insightful talk from our speakers, so definitely we will continue that in the future. And I would like to thank all our attendees for sticking around with us and all the comments on the chat as well. Our Seldom Heard forums are normally organised between 6 to 8 weeks, so watch out the space, and we will share that soon, hopefully with our next topic. And yes, not to forget the NHS Futures workspace. That will be a workspace for individuals to network and communicate with our speakers as well. But I'd like to end and say thank you, everyone, and hopefully I will see you in the next forum. Thank you to all our speakers.